Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings. We do have a rainfall warning issued for parts of Scotland as we head into tomorrow, and that really is because we're going to see some heavier rainfall but falling over extremely saturated ground after we did see those huge amounts of rain on the weekend where we did see an amber warning issued. We'll have a look at the medium range, look at the UKV, look at the next 5 days or so, looking at the latest on the temperatures and the precipitation. And it's looking fairly dry across the south tomorrow, with still the warm air around, but we are going to see rainfall moving in from Wednesday and Thursday. Initially, as I said, tomorrow starting in Scotland, Wednesday, Thursday sweeping southwards, giving some heavy rain for all as some Atlantic fresh air does sweep in. However, one pattern we have seen appear in the models recently, and is now looking pretty likely for the weekend, as we start to see some Arctic air arriving. Again, nothing spectacularly cold, nothing out of this world, but maybe 5 degrees below average for the time of year. Wintry showers for Scotland over the higher ground, and potentially even some widespread frosts in northern areas, and generally quite cold weather with a bit of early winter through the weekend and into the start of next week. It is a transient pattern. It's only lasting maybe 2, 3, 4 days, but nevertheless it's looking pretty cold, and we'll be able to have a look at the latest on that from both the UKV and the long-range charts from the GFS, GM, Eastern WF and the ensembles, and of course have a look what the rest of October does have in store, as we are looking likely to see some quite oscillating patterns, and there are some interesting patterns developing on some runs, maybe some easterly winds, things like that, but no concrete agreements beyond sort of day 7 at this stage. So we'll leave that a little bit open-ended for the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Today's been another pretty stunning day for most areas, especially England, Wales, Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and even into parts of Scotland today, where it has been abysmal over the weekend. There are some patches of rainfall around, and there have been some cloud and rain through today, but really light and patchy. Most areas, as I said, quite dry. Temperatures this evening still relatively mild, especially across parts of the south and the east, but temperatures still hovering in the high teens around 7-8 p.m. Really is an exceptionally warm air mass, but it is going to slowly get swept away by cold air and a weather front that is lingering out of the Atlantic at the moment. If we do go to the future radar, you can see all this lingering rain out in the Atlantic. Nothing too heavy yet, but this is the sign of cooler, colder air coming out of the North Atlantic, heading our way over the next 24 hours or so. Now, that rainfall will initially be primarily in Scotland, starting at 6 a.m. tomorrow until 9 p.m. tomorrow. Heavy rainfall will affect parts of western Scotland on Tuesday, bringing the risk of additional flooding and transport disruption. Now, it hasn't been updated since yesterday, but 15 to 25 millimetres quite widely, maybe 40 to 50 millimetres over some higher ground. Again, not ridiculous amounts of rainfall from one event, but it's because it's falling on such saturated ground. That is why the yellow warning has been issued. Do check this out if you are more interested, but I won't go into detail because we did have a look at it in yesterday's video. Now, if you do go over to the UKV, we'll be able to see the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. You see earlier today, it was pretty dry, a bit of cloud around, but relatively decent weather for early to mid-October. However, overnight tonight, that rainfall starts to arrive for the early hours as the dividing line between the mild air, warm air to the south, and the cold air to the north becomes more apparent once again. Now, the rainfall will not be too bad, but it will be heavy at times, but pretty persistent. And it will slowly sweep southwards and eastwards as we head into Wednesday. And you can already see a few hints of snow showers or wintry showers across Scotland as that cold air starts to dig in. Further southwards, rainfall starting to move in. So Wednesday, during the afternoon, we could just about get away from the rainfall in the early part of the day, but by the evening that rainfall will set in, giving pretty abysmal conditions, especially across parts of the Midlands, East Anglia, into southern England. That eventually will sweep through, and as we head into Thursday, we're in an Atlantic air mass, fresh air mass, but we're not in the truly Arctic air yet. We'll have a look at the division of the air masses in a minute, and you'll be able to see it's a bit of a tiered system. We're going from very warm air at the moment to more average air mass, and then we're going to actually quite a cold air mass into the weekend. And you see another weather front sweeping in from the north. It's really quite thin line is a cold front with the very cold Arctic air behind it, or at least very cold for this time of year. Ahead of that, though, we see a bit of a channel low developing, or at least a disturbance developing, and that could give some heavy rain through Friday in the far south, giving pretty abysmal conditions in places and very heavy rainfall. Do need to keep a very close eye on that. It's the nature of these sort of systems can shift further northwards and southwards at very short notice, so I wouldn't take this position of that rainfall as gospel at this stage. But beyond that, into Friday, we start to see wintry showers develop in the north. Again, nothing too widespread and mainly over higher routes, but you couldn't rule out a bit of snowflakes, some sleet or growlpool to even moderate hills. Beyond that, as we head into the weekend, still looking pretty fresh and cold, and more wintry showers, even looking more widespread there through Saturday afternoon, and a very cold northerly breeze. Now, if you look at the upper air temperatures, look at the contrast. Mid to high teens at 850 HPA now. Still holding on to that warmth until around Wednesday, when colder, fresher Atlantic air does sweep in, and you can see it's around the 0 degree isotherm, so it's cold, maybe down to -1 or -2, but it's nothing crazy. It's average to below average, and it actually doesn't develop too far southwards and kind of loses its steam. The real cold air does try and move in around that -3 or -4 line, but doesn't quite get in. However, as we head into Friday, cold air makes another charge southwards, and some really quite cold air gets in. The -1, -2 isotherm gets all the way down to southern England, and the -5 or even 6 isotherm gets into Scotland. So a very cold air mass, and you see the dew points widely down towards freezing or below freezing. So a real risk of frost developing, especially in the north, and potentially in the south on Sunday and Monday, but we can't look in too far in advance at this stage. And there is the risk of wintry showers. With these low dew points, there is the risk anywhere, really, of seeing some snowflakes or some growlpool, some hail, or some sort of wintry flavour from the showers. If you look at the max temperatures now, you can see through this afternoon we saw temperatures widely into the mid-20s, 24 or 25 degrees. Just take a note of that, because we'll see what next Saturday is showing for 3 p.m. temperatures, and it is, let's say, a complete different season to what we've seen over the last couple of days and what we've seen today. Even into Tuesday, we're still looking likely to see 21 to 23 degrees in the south and the east. By Wednesday, things is cooling down. Under that rainfall, we could just about see 17 to 20 degrees in that muggy air, but to the north of it, low teens at best. By Thursday, all areas are into the mid to low teens, and will only continue to drop from there. Friday could just about nudge an 18 or 19 in the far south, but further northwards, 10 to 14 degrees. And finally, overnight into Saturday, could develop frost for Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, Northern England, maybe even to parts of Wales, and potentially relatively widespread across the central belt of Scotland. And then into Saturday afternoon, look at those temperatures widely in Northern Ireland, Northern England, higher ground of Wales, and pretty much all of Scotland, mid to high single digits at best, even low digits or low single digits, or touching only freezing in some areas of the high ground of Scotland. And look at the south of England, 11 to 13 degrees, really quite cold. Again, below average for the time of year, only by a few degrees, by like 3 or 4 degrees in southern areas. But it's that stark contrast to what we've seen the last couple of days, where it's been 10 degrees above average in some areas. So almost a 15-degree temperature swing in places, and it is going to make it feel like we've gone from summer to late autumn, early winter in a very short space of time, a matter of days. Now, to have a look at the sort of macro look at this and see why this is developing, you can see the high pressure building in at the moment. It's bringing southerly winds, but eventually a northwesterly wind arrives, bringing cool air back in. But we see a bit of a ridge of high pressure develop, so it halts that northerly flow, and that's why the cold air doesn't really get much further southwards than the Northern Isles of Scotland. Fresh air gets in, but nothing that makes any cold. But beyond that, we do see a proper northerly flow develop. You see the black line of where the general jet stream direction is. It does sink southwards, and we open the floodgates to the northerly winds. We'll have a look at the air mass in a minute. And it goes pretty cold and sustains itself to around Monday or Tuesday before a ridge of high pressure built in. Now, this is where we do start to see some uncertainty. Some runs see the Atlantic break through and give us some oscillating up and down, zonal pattern. But the GFS and even the Eastern 3F today actually develops a bit of a Scandinavian high and tries to pull in easterly winds. Again, this time of year won't be that cold, but it'll be fairly dry, it would be fairly fresh, chilly, and potentially quite frosty and foggy. Now, if you put on the raw upper air temperatures, again, it's not going to look spectacular because we are in October, of course, and there's not that much cold air available to our north, but it really is cold for the time of year. See, fresh air arrives by Wednesday, Thursday, and then truly Arctic air arrives by Sunday into Monday, and then eventually the high pressure builds in and we see pretty chilly or cold easterly winds developing. Another way to view this is by having a look at the potential equivalent temperatures, and you see all these yellows developing at the moment, which is warm air or very mild air. Look at the blues to our north. A cold air mass moves in for Wednesday, Thursday, but then an even colder, darker blues arrive for Sunday through to Monday, and they don't really go too far all the way to the end of this GFS run, with those easterly winds keeping us in a fresh and cold pattern. And the last way to view this is look at the temperature deviation around the 6 to 8 degrees below average, even some areas getting 10 degrees below average across parts of the Northern Isles of Scotland and Iceland. There could see some blizzards in those locations. Again, if we actually have a look at the total snow depth, you can see Iceland's getting buried over the next few days with snowfall as that low pressure moves out, and even some snowfall arriving from northern Scotland from the latest GFS. Pretty similar from the GM, at least in the mid-range. Again, that fresher Atlantic air moves in, eventually the northerly wind arrives, even digging that cold air further southwards. The high pressure tries to build in to our north and our east and has a go, so it does develop a similar pattern to the GFS and the ECMWF, but this is where the Atlantic tries to break through, and actually we go incredibly mild here with a very strong southerly wind on the cusp of cold easterlies. You see that cold pull to our east, but we're in this slither of milder air stuck within this lower pressure system. So just again another pattern that we'll have to just another pattern to sort of have a look at. Now finally, if we have a look at the latest ECMWF, again you can see a fresher northerly wind arriving over the next couple of days, and eventually that much colder northerly wind arrives by the weekend, and the high pressure builds in and gives us a fresher easterly flow. Now the wind direction is coming a tad more off the continent than from Scandinavia, so the air mass is slightly warmer, ever so slightly warmer. You see the temperature deviation, it's still average to below average in general, but just not tapping into this very cold air that could arrive after that. But yeah, still a very similar pattern to the GFS and having a go at what the GM was showing as well, which is a Scandinavian high. So some very interesting developments in the last couple of days with this colder pattern that has been sort of rumbling within the models for about a week or so now. We did some videos last week talking about potentially the arrival of winter. We were flirting with it, and then it kind of disappeared for a day or two out of the model output, and has now re-emerged and is looking quite likely to happen this upcoming weekend and potentially beyond that. But there is a lot of uncertainty, the long-term view of this, whether it is a bit of a colder snap, or whether we are developing some colder patterns into the second half of October. Again, I must put this in perspective. There's no chance we see any widespread snowfall. There's no chance we see any widespread properly cold weather. I'd be surprised if areas in England and Wales get much below 10 degrees in the day. Most of these areas will still be in the low teens. It's still, compared to winter temperatures, it's still relatively mild. It's just a lot colder than it's been recently, and most likely going to be below average. The risk of frosts and maybe some winteriness in Scotland. So just putting that into perspective, we're not expecting any bigs from the east or anything like that at all, but some early or mid-autumn cold spell is looking on the cards here. If you finish by looking at the ensembles, you can see why there is some uncertainty. We see the very warm air at the moment, and a little plunge as we head towards the middle of this week, and a brief rise as we see that area of heavy rain move in by Wednesday, Thursday time, and then we see that plunge again, even bigger plunge as we head into the weekend with the upper air temperatures 5, 6, 7 degrees below average. This is where the uncertainty is. The operational run has been on its own when it develops those easterly winds, keeping us in a cold pattern off the near constant. But most of the other runs go average to above average again and re-emerge the precipitation. And that's why I said the most likely scenario is actually for more of an Atlantic onslaught than for easterly winds develop. But the three main models have shown it, so perhaps we are seeing a bit of a delay with the ensemble members. Can't say that for certain until we see the next sort of 24 hours of runs, but very interesting to see that. You can see the 2 meter temperatures looking pretty cold next week, down from 24, 25 degrees possible tomorrow, down to 11 or 12, and temperatures around the mid-single digits, could even be lower. Again, the ensemble members do struggle sometimes with the overnight temperatures, especially when it's based on radiation, where we have clear skies, cold air mass, dry air, and the heat escapes very quickly. So sometimes the models struggle with that, so most likely going to be slightly cold, and that is showing. And you can see the dew points plunging. Look at that 50-degree dew point as that heavy rain moves in during the middle of this upcoming week. or the middle of this week we're now in, and then you can see the dew points down towards freezing, or much lower than that, down to -5 on some runs by the weekend. So huge contrast incoming. Now finally, if we look at the ECMWF ensembles, it's even more of a stark plunge in those upper air temperatures as we head into the weekend, but very similar trajectory there, with a dip in the next couple of days, a brief rise as the rainfall moves in for Wednesday and Thursday, and then we see, again, another big dip towards very cold air for the weekend before average to above average with lots of rainfall, and the 2 metre temperatures are looking pretty cold indeed. More on some members here going down towards the freezing mark, and quite a few around only 11 or 12 degrees in the day. Finally, though, just want to have a look at Glasgow as an example of up in Scotland. You can see quite cold arriving in the next sort of 24 hours or so, as that northerly wind does arrive in the next day or so, but doesn't get much further south than Scotland until about Friday, Saturday time. You can see it is cold with the upper air temperatures even getting down to -5 line by Saturday, Sunday and Monday. So quite a cold period coming up for Scotland. Again, we can see the 2 metre temperatures, maybe only 7 or 8 degrees in the day and down towards freezing at night. And if we actually just have a look at the GFS, we'll be able to see if there's any snow, and you can see, yes, Glasgow has a few snow spikes as we head into the weekend. Again, most likely just to be a few wintry showers, and any proper snowfall, we're looking at many hundreds of metres above sea level up in the highlands, over the hills and mountains. But nevertheless, it is middle of October, so we can't. This is pretty cold and a little bit earlier than we usually expect. But very interesting seeing this pattern starting to develop. So if you have hated the warm weather at the moment, if you're looking forward to something a bit drier, if you're especially in Scotland, a bit more frosty, a little bit more, a little colder as well, more seasonable, then definitely this upcoming weekend, widely and even the middle of this working week for Scotland and northern areas, we're looking like we're going to see an early taste of winter. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you have enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe if you're new, as we'll have some more updates over the coming days. And I'll see you again for another video soon.